Hidden rituals of King Tut. Ancient necklace fragment reveals secrets of power, loyalty, and rebirth. A newly analyzed fragment of an ancient necklace depicting Egypt's boy king, Tutankhamun, has unveiled hidden rituals of loyalty and divine symbolism once used to bind the kingdom's elite to the throne. Now let's deep dive into this story on the AI
Okay,
podcast.
let's unpack this. Imagine trying to run a vast empire like ancient Egypt. Your power is absolute, but it completely relies on the loyalty of thousands of officials.
Right, thousands of very ambitious people.
Exactly. So how do you keep them aligned? You could give them gold, sure, or grant them land, but the pharaoh often chose something, well, something far more subtle.
Yeah.
And in a way, much more powerful.
A small, incredibly beautiful piece of jewelry.
That's it?
And that piece of jewelry, or in this case, a tiny fragment of one, is the focus of our entire deep dive today. We are looking at an artifact labeled ECM 1887.
And it seems so minor, right? It's just this one piece kind of isolated in a museum collection.
But the detective work behind it is stunning. It reveals these long-lost, high-stakes royal rituals. We're talking about ancient political maneuvering.
Absolutely. And our sources really zero in on the meticulous interpretation of this single artifact by a Yale PhD student, Mike Trich. This isn't just about archaeology.
No, not at all. It's a masterclass in reading material culture as a form of, political communication.
So that's our mission for this deep dive.
Our mission is to understand precisely how this tiny piece, which shows the young Pharaoh Tutankhamun doing something very specific, very charged, was not just decoration.
Okay.
Trich argues it was a calculated royal instrument, a tool strategically used by the court to enforce fealty, to reinforce status, and to maintain absolute control over the Egyptian elite.
So we're going to see how an entire system of power was sort of baked into this one object.
Exactly.
So let's start with the object itself. ECM 1887. You said it's a fragment.
It is. It now resides in the Myers collection at Eton College in the UK,
Yeah.
and it's a tiny, colorful piece of what was once a broad collar.
And the main image is the face of the boy king, Tutankhamun. Very recognizable.
Very. And when you picture it, don't think of solid gold. This piece is a triumph of Egyptian craftsmanship using, readily available materials.
Like what?
Sand, flint, maybe some crushed quartz pebbles,
No.
all molded and then glazed to create this durable, jewel-tone faience.
And then the material is important.
It's critical because it allowed for essentially mass production and distribution. It meant many officials could receive one of these.
And the physical evidence on the piece, it tells us a lot about its original purpose. You mentioned the material, but crucially, it has tiny drilled holes.
Yes, those holes are the giveaway. They tell us it was once strung and attached to a much larger, sweeping, broad collar, the kind that would have rested right across the wearer's shoulders and chest.
Demanding attention.
It was not something you hid under a cloak. It was designed to broadcast status, loudly and clearly.
And this is where Trich's thesis really moves from art history into, political science.
I'd say so. His key conclusion is that the entire broad collar was part of a formalized system of royal patronage. It was a prestigious gift given directly by the king.
An instrument of control.
An instrument of control, explicitly. Think about the high-stakes world of the pharaonic court. You have officials constantly competing for the king's attention. So to receive this collar meant the pharaoh himself had elevated your status. It's a literal, physical broadcast of a privileged, intimate relationship with the divine ruler,
It's a tool designed to bind the recipient through symbolic power.
ensuring that loyalty was paid back in governance and support.
But I have to ask, in an empire built on, monumental wealth, why a glazed quartz collar? Why not just hand out an actual ingot of gold or a deed to an estate? Wouldn't that secure more loyalty?
That's the core misunderstanding we often bring to ancient societies. Material wealth, like land, it can be contested, it can be taken away.
Okay.
Symbolic capital, which is what this collar represents, is far more potent. It ties the recipient's personal identity and prestige directly to the pharaoh's power. These collars carried immense cultic meaning.
Meaning they weren't just fashionable.
Oh, far from it.
Yeah.
In ancient Egypt, these gifts were believed to be transformative. They could symbolically ennoble the wearer, rejuvenate them, and even in some contexts, grant them a form of divine endorsement.
So you're receiving a spiritual upgrade.
A spiritual upgrade, rubber-stamped by the only person on earth who could grant such a thing. That dual nature, The secular rank-up combined with the sacred endorsement of the gods is precisely why these gifts were the ultimate political currency.
So we have this powerful gift, but the transfer of power needed a stage, right?
It needed a stage. And this brings us to the specific ritual setting where these collars were often given out, these events called diacritical feasts.
Diacritical feast, that sounds very formal.
It's a wonderful example of political theater. These were elite banquets, yes, but they were carefully orchestrated, high-tension events. The term diacritical itself comes from a Greek root meaning distinguishing or separating.
Separating whom from whom?
Separating the privileged from the exceptionally privileged, and the exceptionally privileged from the truly supreme. The purpose was ruthlessly practical.
Which was?
To reinforce Egypt's strict social hierarchy in a visible, undeniable way. Guests were not seated randomly. They were separated by rank. They received different quality goods, different foods, and certainly different types of gifts.
It was a visual contract. You received the collar in front of all your peers, and they saw your elevation. This wasn't a private little ceremony.
Exactly. The whole structure of the feast was designed to showcase favor and affirmation. The gifts collars, rare spices, exotic foods, fine linen, they were used as physical markers of political favor.
So if you walked out of that feast wearing a collar like this one,
everyone knew your status had been publicly and divinely affirmed. It took the invisible workings of political allegiance and made them physically wearable.
let's look closer at what was actually being affirmed. We have to drill down into the visual details on ECM 1887 because the symbolism is so dense.
It is. Tutankhamun is young, yet he's depicted in full regalia. He's wearing the blue crown, the khipresh.
A war crown.
Well, yes and no. It's essentially a soft, rounded war crown, but in this kind of ritual context, it had moved far beyond warfare. It's about renewal and creation.
What else is he wearing?
He's also depicted with the protective cobra, the uraeus, and he's richly adorned with the broad necklace, bracelets, armbands, and a meticulously pleated kilt.
And Tritch didn't just look at this fragment in isolation, did he?
Not at all. His method was all about rigorous comparative analysis. He took this one small image and compared it directly to large-scale scenes in tomb reliefs, on stone slabs, and, maybe most importantly, to objects from Tutankhamun's own burial chamber.
Like what?
Specifically his golden throne and a small golden shrine.
And what did comparing those objects tell him?
It confirmed the intentionality of the imagery. For instance, the Golden Throne shows Tutankhamun and his wife Ankhesenamun in this very domestic yet regal scene. The consistency of the regalia, especially the blue crown in these intimate or ritual settings, proves that this specific look was strongly associated with royal fertility and dynastic projection.
Not just day-to-day rule.
Not at all.
So let's focus on that crown, the khipresh, the blue crown. If it's not for war in this context, why renewal?
What's fascinating is the almost biomedical role the crown seems to play in religious iconography. It is intrinsically tied to themes of fertility, moisture, and immediate rebirth.
This was the crown for a fresh beginning.
Exactly. The crown worn for sacred rites that demanded a fresh beginning.
Can you give some examples of those sacred rites?
Certainly. Kings wearing the blue crown were consistently depicted in temple reliefs during acts of nursing from goddesses, literally drinking divine sustenance.
Wow.
They wore it during rituals aimed specifically at the rejuvenation of the body and the monarchy, and perhaps most symbolically, it was strongly associated with the opening of the mouth ceremony.
Which was the rite used to restore the five senses and symbolically life to the deceased.
Precisely. It is a crown of life, of constant revitalization. And given the intense political pressure on the young king to secure the line after the upheaval of the Amarna period, this imagery was not casual.
No.
Scholars have strongly linked the blue crown's appearance with Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun to outright erotic symbolism, explicitly supporting ideas of fertility and dynastic continuity.
It speaks to his single primary royal obligation to make sure the royal house continued.
Yes.
And that necessity is visually reinforced by the king's very next action on the fragment. He's drinking from a lotus chalice.
Yes, the white lotus chalice. It's a beautifully evocative image that ties the political need for an heir back into the foundational creation myths.
These cups were common.
Very. These specific wide, fluted cups were pervasive during the Amarna period at official drinking events, and they were frequently featured in offerings to the goddess Hathor.
And Hathor governed fertility, pleasure, feminine power.
That's right. Her connection instantly grounds the scene in procreation. But more fundamentally, the act of drinking itself held profound sexual and creative symbolism in ancient Egyptian culture.
How so?
If you look at standard banquet scenes, you often see women pouring liquids from these same lotus-shaped vessels. The act of pouring or receiving is connected with fertility and creation,
And the vessels themselves are shaped like the lotus flower.
which closes at night and reopens in the morning, symbolizing rebirth.
So when we see Tutankhamun raising the chalice to his lips, this is not just a picture of him enjoying a drink at a party.
Far from it. Trish synthesizes this beautifully. The image of Tutankhamun drinking from that chalice, and we can infer it was likely poured for him by his wife, like a cinnamon, is a visual stand-in for two intertwined, inseparable royal duties.
Which are?
One, their sexual union, and two, his non-negotiable obligation to produce a royal heir. It's an advertisement for dynastic success.
That's powerful enough on its own. But let's go deeper. You mentioned creation myths. What is the ultimate mythological connection Trish makes here?
He connects this imagery to the oldest and most sacred of Egyptian creation stories, the Heliopolitan creation myth. This myth centers on the creator god Adam, who emerged from the primordial waters of Nun.
And how did Adam generate life?
Alone. The myth describes Adam generating the first twin deities through an act of solitary creation, which ancient texts often describe as either spitting or masturbation. Essentially, the creation of life comes from the action of pouring out or issuing forth liquid.
Oh, I see. So the king drinking, or being poured for, is directly echoing this divine liquid act.
Exactly. By raising the chalice, Tutankhamun is not just drinking, he is symbolically reenacting the moment Adam generated life itself. This elevates the king beyond a mere mortal ruler to a participant in the cosmic process.
So by wearing this fragment, the official wasn't just loyal to a boy.
They were loyal to a king who upheld cosmic order and ensured the creation of the next generation of gods and men. That's the kind of power that truly binds an elite.
It's amazing to think that one small fragment of glazed quartz, probably less than an inch across, contains the blueprint for Egyptian cosmic order, dynastic sexuality, and political control.
It's incredible.
But before we summarize the bigger implications, let's briefly touch on the fragment's own journey. It wasn't found in the tomb, right?
Correct. ECM 1887 was not found with the king's primary burial treasures. It entered the antiquities market in the late 19th century and was eventually purchased by an Eton College graduate who bequeathed it to the collection.
And we should probably note, for completeness, that Trish's study, while incredibly rigorous, hasn't yet undergone the formal, lengthy peer review process.
That's true. It's still new research.
Still, it illuminates so much about the young king's incredibly short reign. He ruled for only about 9 years, from 1332 BC to 1323 BC.
Took the throne when he was maybe 9 or 10 years old. A brief but historically critical reign.
He married his half-sister, Ankhesenamun.
Yes, maintaining that volatile royal tradition of marrying within the immediate family. And while his cause of death at 18 is uncertain, modern studies are quite clear that he suffered numerous health issues.
Almost certainly due to generations of severe inbreeding within the 18th dynasty royal family.
Exactly.
That is a striking detail. The intense pressure to produce an heir, reinforced by symbols like the blue crown and the lotus chalice, came at an unimaginable personal and physical cost to the people actually wearing those crowns.
Indeed. It highlights that the concept of dynastic renewal wasn't always successful or benign. It was a brutal system that placed cosmic expectations on very fragile human bodies.
Yet, despite his short, troubled life, we're still talking about his legacy today, largely because of the sheer magnitude of his tomb discovery.
Howard Carter's find in 1922 in the Valley of the Kings was unprecedented. Over 5,000 objects. It truly redefined Egyptian archaeology.
Solid gold sandals, elaborate statues, ceremonial chariots, games.
A complete inventory of a pharaoh's material world. And the existence of ECM 1887, a similar object that ended up outside the tomb, shows us that this highly potent symbolism was disseminated widely among the elite. It wasn't just confined to the royal burial.
And that really is the final takeaway we have to stress. Objects like ECM 1887 were not just beautiful ornamentation.
Absolutely not. They were manufactured, integrated, and distributed as powerful instruments. Political devices blending religion, dynastic pressure, mythology, and state authority, all to enforce loyalty and sustain Egypt's rigid hierarchical order.
This tiny, isolated depiction of the king drinking reveals an entire, complex worldview.
It's centered on the fragile balance of royal power, the necessity of rebirth, and the use of symbolic capital to maintain control. It wasn't a gift, it was a multi-layered contract of allegiance, paid for in prestige and guaranteed by the gods.
And that leads us to a final provocative thought for you to consider. If a single fragment of a decorative gift, this minuscule piece of glazed quartz, held this much ritual and political weight, what other layers of complex meaning are still waiting to be fully decoded? In the thousands upon thousands of objects recovered from Tutankhamun's tomb and other royal caches.
And to bring it to today, if ancient rulers could embed this much strategic communication into gifts, how much political strategy is embedded in the seemingly mundane gifts and ceremonies of modern leaders? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. Can a small object like a necklace fragment truly influence the understanding of an entire culture? How? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.